Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents River Meets the Sea, a novel, by Rachael Moorthy, narrated by Braden Wright. 1. The River. Kikite, New Westminster, Canada, 1946. Chah, go down to water. Stalo came rolling up in waves. The mouth of the river roared open. My muscles tensed, stiff as cedar, as silver water swelled to swallow me whole for being a left-handed bastard, and for the bad thing I'd done to Widow Belia. She was right to say I was a savage boy with bad spirits tangled up inside of me. "Leave it to Cuddy Wifter to open the gates of hell!" Vince's craggy voice ricocheted off the river. Clay splattered against our sun-bronzed calves as if the earth itself were protesting. I followed his lanky strides as he raced to higher ground. We dove into the long grass and clutched the dry tuffets as the earth laughed beneath us. My thoughts collapsed into a single clear entity, as if I'd lifted a stone out of rippling water. It was all just water. Water falling out of the sky, water flowing in the river, water pooling in my eyes, droplets collecting on my tongue, my skin, my hands. The language of water was how my mother called out to me. According to Children's Aid, my birth mother was a Canton Alley lady of the night with an insatiable itch. I didn't believe a word of it. Children's Aid was a pack of no-good lying child stealers. They scooped me up as a toddler. No birth certificate, just a moldy diaper and cradle cap, tied to the front porch by a leash. Brought me back to the orphanage to delouse me before shipping me off to my first foster. My father was every drunk on the streets of New Westminster, one of countless shell-shocked shells of men staggering down the quay, a flask on each hip and a lady of the night for each limb lost on Vimy Ridge. He was Irish, maybe Dutch. I looked for my mother in every woman I saw. She was the one carrying milk crates, all ebony victory rolls and freckles. The one in the apple orchard with terracotta skin and a chipped grin. I saw her in the faded Soldiers Without Guns posters at the motorcycle club, dressed in flannel and a welding helmet that looked like Napoleon's bicorn. I knew that my mom, whoever she was soft and strong, the way a mother should be, a gentle current carrying her child through this awful world. Not like Belia, or the nuns at the orphanage, who were erratic and sharp as a midsummer hailstorm. Every time I was down at the river, swaddled by the soothing taffeta of liquid, I felt my mother, the force of the torrent and the pacifying sweetness of water, searching. That morning, at high water, Mrs. Belia had melted into a mirage of my mother. The window glow ironed out the deep lines in her face, and refracted early sunlight spilled into her eyes, sparkling polygons of gold and river green. Her silver hair was dipped in shadow, turning it raven black. She hummed along to Moonlight Serenade as she buttered hot rye bread. Then she stepped away from the window and turned back into her sea hag self. "Use your right hand. No devil's grip in this house." She clocked me in the back of the head with her cold, flour-caked hands. I'd been in her care for 2 long years, and I was still buck-fisted and feral, still teeming with bad spirits. Mrs. Belia took to fastening my devil arm behind my back with a ripped apron. But even a year later, using my right hand still felt wrong and inverted, like looking at life through a mirror. It took me eons to finish a meal. I swallowed down the last globule of honeyless porridge and was tossed out onto the porch with my foster brother Gordon, a mouth-breathing darling with ever-crusted blue eyes. The whole church was gaga over him because he had a hole in his heart. Oh, isn't he a walking miracle, proof of the living light? Simply because he hadn't died. Dressed in these dreadful short pants that itched worse than nettle leaves, We walked around the corner of Edinburgh Street to the motorcycle club in what was called, back then, the DL, the District of London. I kept my bucket for candlefish and snakes buried beneath a crawl space at the club, wrapped in one of Mrs. Bellier's arm-tying aprons. I clutched the collar of Gordon's knit pullover. "Say anything to Bellier, and I'll skin you." She'd give me the belt if she found out I'd been skipping church all this time, so I waited until we were out of sight to make a run for it. Gordon craned his neck towards the sunlight, rocking back and forth on his heels as the Lacey girls, all chinless and browless, with disheveled mops of ash-blonde curls, came around the rose hedge. "Come along, scamp. Leave the devil to his mischief." The eldest, Dolores, flashed me a sardonic grin. She grabbed Gordon's sleeve, tugging him along. Then I was off, bucket at the hip, weaving in and out of the ambrosia and gala trees, tumbling over the thorny thickets surrounding thin strips of marshland. August air was all blackberry and salal. The smell of fermenting fruit and skunk cabbage sat heavy in my lungs as I brawled through the brambles. The long grass grazed my knees. Nearly stepped on a toad before I reached the swing bridge that soared over Stallow, the river. The opalescent moon was still visible in the melting blue sky. Every time I came up to the swing bridge, I felt anchored. The brawny bottom cords, the intricate steel webs, and the great red trusses were like a staircase leading up into heaven. Below the bridge, docked tugboats slept. Salmon fishers and watchmen flocked, laughing, drinking, storytelling. From the bridge, I saw Vince and Jagger down by the boats, chatting with Ray. I scaled down the slanted silt rock, met by the reek of the bank and the booms that I loved, the familiar stink of wet cedar, metal chains, and rotting candlefish. "If it ain't Cuddy Wifter!" Leaning smugly against the base of Ray's tugboat, Vince tossed me a wedge of fry bread. Sundays were bannock days. Ray liked to experiment with berries and perennial herbs, blackberry and wild violet, salmonberry and sage. I sank my teeth into the fried gold, dappled with orange and purple berry confetti. The bannock dissolved against the roof of my mouth and churned gummy between my teeth. I recognized the thick sweetness, taste of earthy blueberry with black currant at the core. "Salal for sure," I said, sucking a crumb off my pinky finger. "And—" "Cloudberry," Ray nodded. "Rare. Found 'em in a bog." "Huh." I let the floral flavor evaporate on my tongue. "It's like cream." "Like a cloud." Ray grinned. "Any catches?" I asked. Ray shook his head and groaned. "Dry spell, eh? Salmon berries are small and pale. Creator's up to something. I can feel it in the tempo of the river. Ground feels moody. You cubs'll catch more candlefish in that bucket of yours. Not a good year for sockeye, sad to say." "Rats." Jagger folded his arms. I smothered my second piece of bannock with sun-softened butter and looked down at the river rushing by, trying to see what Ray saw. The closer I looked, the more convinced I was that I could see it too. I believed in Ray and the river more than I'd ever trusted the blue lace agate forehead of that pastor with the facial veins or the gilded pages of his so-called holy book. Lost my words, eh?" Ray laughed, sad and low. His hooded eyes were like silver crescent moons. I studied Ray's Tuscan brown skin and straight black hair. He stood his right leg up over the rail of the boat and stared off into the endless silver. A story was coming. "Once, we found an octopus at the booms in Burrard Inlet, the color of old socks," Ray began, between swigs from his red canteen. "Well, it was a hexapus, to be true. On account of it only had 6 tentacles. I met a river pig who said that a few miles east of the sawmill a fellow he knew had fallen off the dock into the water and was seized by the creature. Ray latched onto my neck with his warm, leathery hands. I tried to pry them away, failing to hold back my laughter. The hexapus dragged him farther under. Deeper, 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 infinite black. Luckily, the logger had his hunting knife in his boot and managed to sever 2 of the beast's prongs, pry himself free of the suction-cupped grips of death, and swim to the surface. You never know what's down there, deep, deep down. I imagined being pulled down into blackness as my lungs filled up with water, the light at the surface disappearing. Vince leapt in, pulled Ray's hands off my neck, and swam me up for air. We collapsed in a fit of laughter, water coming out of our eyes and mouths, the spray of the river misting our faces. "I thought octopuses came from the sea." Jagger scrunched the vacant space where his eyebrows belonged. His snow-white hair glittered beneath the radiant sun. "Right you are," Ray said, "but this river flows into the sea, and things end up where they don't belong all the time. Ain't that right, you delinquents?" He smirked as he offered us each a sip from his flask. Jagger took a swig, then spat it back out over the starboard edge and into the water. Vince and I shook our heads at Jagger's tenderness and fought each other for the liquid fire. We knew that one day we'd both be like Ray, that we'd drink whiskey like water. So we gulped it down without wincing, even though it stung our throats and we hated it. People who spend their lives around water start to become like water themselves. Fluid, soft and strong at the same time. Ray was firm in his fluidity, steadily flowing like Stalo. Unlike Mrs. Belia, whose temper was chained and precarious like the log booms. So the first thing I'll say is always, go down to water. Wherever you end up, find the water and go down to it. Ray raised anchor to return to the river. We thanked him for the bannock and raced down to the bank. The 3 of us darted over the compacted silt past the brilliant tugboats and the Chinese fly fishers until we reached the ceaseless rows of chained cedar logs. They floated end to end on the surface of the Silver River, like packages upon packages of hot dogs. Vince stood proudly in the U-shaped crotch of the sycamore maple, clasping on to the rope swing we'd made from the ruins of an old tugboat. He always swung first, letting out a war cry as he soared over the bank. He became a small bird, disappearing into the Cascade mountain range along the horizon. The loud, throaty puffs of a nearing Big Mike train swelled in the distance. Then he let go. His feet hit the slick cedar logs, and he hightailed it, skidding over the booms like a skipped stone. Jagger and I scrambled up the side of the maple. The rope was tough, tearing the insides of our hands until they were raw and glazed pink. It burned when I took hold of it, but when I was swinging, it was like I was wearing that ghostly inside part of myself on the outside. For a moment, every thistle of hair was going in the same direction. I was there. I was real. When my heels hit the booms, greasy and wet like candlefish scales, I had to run like hell or I'd fall between the spaces and drown. We took turns swinging until our arms and legs throbbed. Then we waded in the river and caught candlefish with our hands. I filled my bucket to the brim with the slick little buggers. Jagger flipped over a rock and found 3 red racers, brown snakes marked by the ribbon of red that ran down their backs. He picked up the fattest one and held it up to his sunburned face as it wriggled, revealing its red thread of a forked tongue. "Give it here." Vince reached out his scratched-up arm. Jagger reeled the snake back. "There's 2 others. I want to try something." Vince snatched the snake from Jagger. He held its small, wriggling body firmly in his right hand. With his left, he pulled the switchblade out of his pocket and sliced the snake's head clean off. Its gaping, soundless mouth fell softly into the silt. I cringed, chewed on the inside of my cheek. Jagger kicked Vince in the shin. "What'd you do that for?" You could have killed the smaller ones, I said. Oh, don't snap your caps, Tulips. It's a stupid snake. I felt sick, but figured Vince was closer to manhood than I was, so I shoved that feeling down and followed him. Watery clay splattered the backs of his legs as he ran past the fly fishers and the tugboats. We rose up to the bridge, the echoing tufts of a steam train growing louder and louder as Vince laid the headless snake on the tracks. The smell of steel and rust hung in the air as the carcass, a small brown tube, rattled on the sleeper. "Come on!" Vince yelled. We slithered down to the base of the bridge and crouched beneath the tracks. As the big black train surged across like a shrieking dragon, we cradled our heads between our knees. Intermittent screeches cut into my ears, bounced off my teeth and skull, while pebbles and white stone dust gathered around our feet. The ground settled, and the sound faded. As the train vanished down the track, we hiked back to the top to see what was left of the snake. It was flat, a piece of fabric. Jagger tilted his head. "It looks like suspenders." "Kinda, yeah," I agreed reluctantly. Vince kneaded his stomach with his knuckles. "I'm hungry." And so it was off to Leichenberg's orchard. "Swear to God, Lothar Leichenberg's a myth. We've never seen him. Not once." Vince whacked the blackened base of a bronzed leaf ambrosia tree with a stick. "Crown rot. They need to get rid of this one." We moved to the heart of the orchard. "I mean, there's gotta be someone who picks all this?" Jagger gestured to the apple-filled canopies. I shrugged, and we climbed to the treetops. The tree and I worked together. I could feel the energy pouring out of its limbs and bark, telling me where to grab on, leading me to the next branch as I worked my way up to the top. I perched between the highest branches, where streams of skylight spilled through the holes between the leaves, and all I could see above me were clouds. The orchard was splashed with a medley of crimson, gold, and pale green. The florid smell of early gold, gala, and dewy green leaf enveloped everything. Only early golds and galas were ripe for harvest. The early golds yellow-green and sour. The galas yellow, marred with cream red, tasting of sunlight with brown sugar undertones. I dove down to the lowest branch and shook, sending a cascade of ripe galas to the ground with a soft thud. Jagger held up a glossy crimson apple, nearly the size of his head. Perfect for a wrestling trophy. It was always down to Vince and me. Jagger was mopey and brittle as milfoil. He gave in quickly and shed tears often. Made me grit my teeth to powder. "You pigeon-chested hood!" Vince's lanky tentacles wrapped around my belly like a hexapus. I reached around his hips, and then we were doing a sort of silly waltz. "Take that, Cuddy Whifter!" He kneed me in the gut, and the cloudberry and sage bubbled up through my chest and into the bottom of my throat. I stuck out my right foot behind Vince's heel. He toppled backwards with a snarl. I straddled him, giving him sharp shots to the kidney until he elbowed me in the nose. "Nose punch of death," Vince crowed. Hot blood streamed out of my nostrils. It stung, but the fight wasn't over. I pressed Vince's shoulders down into the earth and leaned over his face. We were two magnets, repelling, my arms and core flexed with fire as Vince arched his back. Blood trickled down from my nose into his mouth. All right, you win," Vince tapped out. I let go, and he rolled away, wiping my blood off his lips. Jagger tossed me the trophy. I winked at Vince, let my nose bleed onto the shellac skin of the gala, and took a bite. The gory tang of victory. "You sick Mick," Vince scoffed and shook his head, brushing dirt off his clothes. "I might be Dutch," I said, between bites of blood gala. "Fat chance. You're Irish. You've got black hair and you leap like a goddamn leprechaun." "I think he looks squaw," Jagger said, picking an early gold. "Like Ray." "Aw, shut the hell up with that." I rolled my eyes. "Well, you do get real brown." Jagger held his alabaster forearm up to mine, russet brown, like sliced apple left out in the sun. My mom's Irish, and my dad's Dutch, or something else. Either way, I'm white like you, I barked. Still don't explain how you get so colored-like, Jagger said. It's called a tan. I shoved Jagger, and he fell backwards, warbling like a chicken. Look at my eyes. I clasped his narrow neck. Blue as the Atlantic. Injuns can't have blue eyes. Hey, Vince cut in, shoving me off Jagger. Mrs. Belia told everyone at church that your mom was a whore, Jagger said. Then I had to beat him up all over again. Palm flat on the base of Jagger's frail neck, pressing his freckled nose into curled black apples and the thick split roots of a gala tree, I noticed the tiered cantaloupe seashell bracket of what looked like bright orange coral. The splash of sunshine bursting out of the heartwood was chicken of the woods. I shoved Jagger to the side, gathering the fan-like fungi into the hem of my shirt. Hey, you hoods! Get the hell off my property! We whipped our necks around to see a hunched figure lumbering towards us, a gun hoisted against his hip. Guess Lothar Leichenberg ain't no myth, I yelled as we blitzed out of the orchard, all back on the same team, the life force of the river surging through our bodies. I gotta head home, I said when we made it back to the DL. If Gordon had gotten there before me, I'd need to explain myself. All right, Cuddy. Meet me at the swing bridge at sunset. Vince winked. Bring cigs. Yeah, if I can get away from the hard-boiled hag. Later, Jag. See ya, Cuddy. I floated past the wilting rose hedges, tinted bronze with rot, on the outskirts of Dublin and London streets, past the motorcycle club, and arrived back at the aged house with the wraparound veranda that was decaying slowly from the underside. I treaded up the steps, quivering hands pocketed around my fragile mushrooms, and slid through the door, begging to go unnoticed. Ah, Ronald, there you are! Widow Belia smacked me on the back of the head, a thick pain. I'd swear she had a plank of cedar for a right hand. Hey, why'd Gordon come home alone? And why is your shirt stained? I looked down at my orange-tinged shirt hem. Mrs. Prime's tabby was on the roof of the chapel again. Well, that is hardly your problem, is it? That Negro-loving lesbian is too old to be taking care of an animal. She can barely take care of herself, no? Up close, Mrs. Belia had veiny, almost translucent skin, eyelids streaked with purple lightning. Her body was as weathered as a woman's of 60, though she was only 37. Gordon needs someone to look after him. I strained every muscle in my face, holding back an eye roll. Well, go chop wood for the stove. Mrs. Belia returned to dicing carrots with a violent intensity. I pulled a face at the back of her head before folding my mushroom haul in a dry dish rag, which I concealed in a thicket of overgrown holly outside. I ought to have been more grateful, I know, but I hated that woman to the soles of her hag feet. She earned her living from fostering. There were 6 of us, me, Gordon, 3 girls who have melted into a single indistinguishable entity in the eye of my memory, and Pat. I didn't care for anyone in the house except Pat. She fluttered around the place, her face round and glossy pink as a cherry blossom. Whether she was slipping out the window to tangle tongues with her most recent suitor, taking me skating, or sneaking into my room with a pocket full of butterscotch candies, she brought spring freshness with her. Met by the spasmodic cluck and warble of the chickens in the yard, I hauled the axe towards the chopping block. I lined the wood up on the pine stump and hacked it into smaller pieces, startling the chickens into a feared trill. Ach, that's not how you chop wood, Ronnie, Belia clucked from the kitchen window. I'll show you. I groaned and contemplated throwing the axe through the window as Belia thundered out onto the veranda and over the dying grass. She rolled up her sleeves before seizing the axe from my hands. I stood back. She lined up the lumber on the pine, right hand on the log. She struck the stump in a single ham-handed swing, breaking the wood unevenly. what looked like the tip of a raw frankfurter flew into the dirt. Then the screaming started. "Look what you made me do!" Belia fell to her knees, her hand a sperm whale spouting blood instead of water. The chickens erupted into chaotic alarm cackles. She hollered for Pat, dousing the grass and wood in maroon, her wide, flat arse tilted to the heavens as she fumbled. "Where is it? Where is it?" The corners of my mouth split open with laughter. Belia's index finger was curled up between the toe of my scuffed-up Oxford and the base of the pine block, but I refused to say a word. I clutched my gut to stop it from rupturing as my eyes welled. Pat came toppling down the steps with her hair tousled, cornflower blue blouse half unbuttoned. Her meatball beau, Bobby or something, came plodding behind her. "Ma, what happened?" Pat trilled. "Ronnie happened." Before I could blink, I was in the air, flying backwards across the front yard. The back of my head thrashed against the side of the chicken coop. "Billy, he's a kid!" cried Pat. "It'd be a civil liability to let the beast live." I could have held my own against the fathead if I hadn't been so wrung out from swinging over the booms and wrestling Vince. There was so much noise, and the back of my head stung. I stayed crouched by the coop until Mrs. Belia, Billy, and Pat drove off to the hospital in Belia's automobile. The lilac sky had deepened to a staid plum with sashes of pale tangerine bleeding through. The chickens had settled, and my ears had stopped ringing. So I stole a few cigarillos from the denim jacket Pat had left draped over the banister, shoveled bread pudding into my trap, fastened a rag of chicken into a sack, and split. The air was calm and warm. I was running, lost in thoughts of my neck being lined up on the pine block when Belia came home, and wound up in an alley crisscrossed by clotheslines hung with vibrant linens of crimson and fuchsia. Like decoration, oil, salt, and fragrant spices sang in the air, followed by a sound like nothing I'd ever heard, glittering in gold like honeycomb or seafoam candy dissolving in a hot cup of maple tea. I forgot who I was, what I was doing. I just had to find the source of that sound. A milkwoman with dark sienna skin and a cerulean head wrap glided past me, and I followed her like a charmed cobra. The way she looked, graceful and dignified, holding the empty milk crate like a scepter, didn't match up with my foster mother's crude descriptions of dark-skinned folks. The saccharine sound coated the air as we crossed a gaggle of colored teenagers playing soccer. The woman nodded at a passing Chinese shopkeep and grabbed an empty blue crate from the stone steps where the singer perched. He plucked a wooden guitar and breathed into a small wind instrument that I didn't recognize. His angelic voice soared over the clotheslines into the sky, dipping into the river before flying back into my ears, like a boomerang that had scooped up all the beauty in the world before delivering it to me. He stopped playing when he noticed me gaping with swollen eyes and blood-stained calves. "What you after, Allie-Mutt? Never seen a harmonica before?" I jolted, spine stiffened. "Cat got your tongue, Allie-Mutt? Where you from? You sure is one weird-looking white boy." He cackled, revealing a big, off-white smile. "Oh, Angel," the milkwoman shook her head. "You know it ain't right to talk like that." I didn't know what to say, so I just ran, towards the thin strip of blue faintly visible along the horizon. As I made my way to the tracks, Vince's sinewy silhouette was visible below the bridge. A visit from the child stealers was on the horizon, and Belia was going to put me on the chopping block with her four-fingered grip. But God, the story was good. I was going to tell Vince, and we were going to laugh until everything made sense again. I picked up a dead twig and ran towards him. "Heidi-ho!" I tossed the stick at Vince's neck. "Well, would you take a gander at that?" Vince said. "Escaped the hag?" "You won't believe what happened." "What?" I handed him a cigarillo. A feathery ache spread throughout my chest as the inconsolable laughter took over. I clutched my gut, desperately sipping air to stop myself from chucking.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?